I love great sword, and I love big numbers. And way back in world, the start of the 5th gen, I set out to hit the highest damage number possible. And I achieved it. And then I bettered it. And I bettered it. And I bettered it. And all was right in the world. And I spawned. And then Rise came along. And once more the call for biggest hitters rang true. And the flame of highest maximum damage was ignited again. And it was glorious. Now we stand in the Forbidden Lands in the 6th gen in Wilds. And once more the question must be asked. What is the highest damage hit possible? Because it's not that. Oh no, it's not that. But that's a good place to start, isn't it? Hello, my fellow hunters, and welcome then to one of my favorite projects to do with each new Monster Hunter title, and it's one with a simple, satisfying goal. How high can make number go on screen? And it has taken a lot of time to work out just how to do that this time around. I've had an attempt where I thought I'd nailed it, hit the number, only to then go back and realize I missed something that could make it just that little bit higher. It requires a perfect build, perfect timed execution, and a whole lot of luck, and thus a whole lot of time. So I hope you will join me and enjoy as I take you on the Wild's journey of highest damage for the first time. When it comes to setting this up then, there are 3 main considerations. The first is, what are we going to hit? The second is, what are we going to hit it with? And the final is, what build and method is going to be powering the hit on the target? So let's start with the target then. And for that, we have to talk about hit zones. So a hit zone is a part of the monster that you attack, right? So let's say its face. The damage you deal is the base damage of your weapon modified by anything your set is doing and various other factors too. But to keep it clean, we'll just assume you're doing 100 damage. And then the face of the monster that you're hitting might have a hit zone of 50. What that means is it will take 50% damage to the face, or your damage times 0.5. So if you hit that monster's face with 100 damage, you'll actually see 50 damage pop up. And that's a very basic way of looking at it. Let's take the most iconic monster as an example in Rathalos. Let's go down to his head and have a look at the numbers. He will take 65% damage from melee cutting damage. He will take 70% of your blunt damage, and he'll take 60% of, firing a bowgun shot into him damage. And then every single part of his body has different numbers for the 3 categories of damage. And that's how you can kind of get a good feel for where you should be attacking for maximum effect, depending on what weapon and build you're using. But that's beyond the scope of what we're doing today. What matters is we're using a greatsword, so we're looking at this column, and then we need to find the monster that has the highest number here. Ideally 100, which means it takes pure times 1 full damage. Obviously, more than 100 would be lovely if a monster has a mechanic that makes it take extra damage for whatever reason, but sadly none of those exist in Wilds, at least not yet. But before we actually select our target based on this then, I want to skip ahead to the what attack we'll use. Now, obviously, Greatsword is the name of the game here because it has the single highest hit in the game in a fully charged, powered up true charge slash. What that means is, you know, when you do your true charge and you hit the little hit before the big hit, that makes it power up and do more damage. That then has a motion value at maximum charge at 2.41. Now, if that was hieroglyphics to you, that's completely understandable. So motion values then are a number tied to every attack in the game. So if I just walk up to the training dummy here and do a single normal overhead slash, that attack has a motion value tied to it, like everything does. And it is a multiplier for your damage. It's to balance things like dual blades hitting really fast, so they have tiny motion values. Greatsword hitting slow, so it has big motion values. But what it inherently means is you have your damage, that gets multiplied by the motion value and then applied to the monster in a simple vacuum. So for example, this normal overhead slash here has a motion value of 78, or times 0.78 of your damage. So currently I have 111 attack. So if I walk up and hit on to this, I will do 72 damage. Now, the astute amongst you might realize that, wait, if you take 111 and times it by 0.78, that's 86 damage, not the 72 you did. That's where hit zones that we just talked about come into. So the damage that you deal is your damage powered by your weapon and set, multiplied by your motion value, and then multiplied again by the hit zone. So the training dummy on a white wound has a hit zone of 80. So if we take our attack, which is 111, we times it by our motion value of 0.78, that gives us a nice 86, closer to 87, which you might be like, wait a minute, that's not the 72 that you actually hit for. Well, that's where the hit zones that we just talked about go into. So a white pre-wound on the training dummy here has a hit zone of 80, or 0.8. So we take our result from last time, times it by 0.8, and we get 69.
Nice.
But again, you might be like, wait, that's still not 72. And yes, we have our final little factor, which is the sharpness of your weapon. This greatsword has green sharpness, which is 5% more damage. And if we take that result and increase it by 5%, we get our 72. And that's kind of your basic damage math for those that are interested in this process. So when it comes to hitting for the highest number, we want to use the highest motion value greatsword attack that we can against the highest hit zone that we can find, and power that up with the most damage from our set that we can get. And lastly, we want to be doing it against a sleeping monster, because the attack that wakes up a sleeping monster is given double damage. Now, because the monster has to be asleep, that means that certain attacks are kind of off the table that do more damage than true charge slash. For example, the cross slash follow-up to our offset, this actually has a higher motion value than nearly a fully powered up true charge at 2.3. But you can't do that against a sleeping monster because it's asleep, so there's nothing to offset. Technically, you could, like, offset a different monster and then somehow try and hit the sleeping one with it, but I think you can agree that is ridiculous. Now, you'll also note then, because of that, you can't actually hit the monster with the little hit of true charge because it's asleep, and that will wake it up. So that tiny 14 will wake it up, so that 224 can't get doubled. Which means in order to do this, we're going to have to do it as a classic sleep wake-up hit. But that means we end up using a weaker version of true charge, like this. The motion value on that maximum charge, true charge without the little hit hitting first, is 1.9, or times 1.9 your damage. The powered up version is 2.41, which is 50% more, but of course impossible against a sleeping monster. Unless you hit a small monster or another monster with the little hit, and then pivot to hit your sleeping target with the big hit. Which, just me saying that, you're probably already like, wow, that's just not gonna happen, right? That's ridiculous. And, kinda, yeah. So, now that we've kind of got that all up to speed, let's actually choose our target. So here we have Fulgur Anjanath, who is the only monster to reach a 100 hit zone in the right condition. Except doing this against a live monster is incredibly tricky, and you'll see that when you see the method, because I was doing this for so long. So you might be like, okay, then what are you gonna do? Well, there is a hidden answer, a secret hero, and it's a palico stood on a crate. Yes! The high performance barrel puncher, the target dummy, is the winner here. Because not only is training a nice controlled environment, it has on a wound a hit zone of 100 or ×1 or full damage, which is delicious. And this actually checks out, because the highest damage hit, the record I pulled off in Monster Hunter Rise, was against the Toadversary training dummy for very similar reasons. So I was very, very thrilled when I learnt this. So we know what attack we're using, a true charge slash. We know what we're hitting, the wounded, sleeping training dummy. Now we need the build to power up our damage as much as possible. And the build is really, once again, quite the interesting conundrum in Wilds, primarily because of the armor and weapon skill split. So because we just care about the highest damage possible, we do need to crit, obviously. But we don't need to have any more than the minimum required affinity to make that happen. Because if you have 1% crit chance and 1,000 damage, yes, it's going to take you 100 tries on average to actually get a crit and therefore the hit, but that is going to give you the biggest number versus having 100% affinity and only 100 damage, thereby guaranteeing you get the crit. So that sucks for me, because it means whatever set I build has to just focus on raw damage and only make sure that it's technically possible for me to crit, and then I just have to try over and 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 over again until it happens. And I do that happily for you guys to see the big number. Anyway, so with that in mind then, what are we actually ending up doing? This is what we end up doing. So we are wearing 4 pieces of Guardian Doshagama. The reason for that, and it could be normal Doshagama 2, is for Doshagama's might. The 4-set Powerhouse 2 is plus 25 raw attack for 3 minutes after triggering an offset, which is a really chunky, tasty amount. Now, I really cannot stress enough how many different combinations of skills and armor and builds I tested and ran through and mapped out to reach the highest EFR possible, and this was my winner. So we get that 4-set Doshagama for an extra 25 raw. We have 3 resentment, as we have 3 2 slots left over for an extra plus 15 raw, because yes, we're going to be doing the hit while we have red health. You know, what's another layer? We have counterstrike for another 25 raw, because yes, we're going to do the hit while counterstrike is active. That gives us 45 seconds, plenty of time. We have level 4 adrenaline rush for another 25 raw. This only lasts 30 seconds, but yep, we're going to do the hit with this up, which means we need need to iframe an attack, and then within 30 seconds, we need to land the hit. That's fine. Of course, heroics is here when our health is below 35%. We just get plus 30% damage. It's the biggest gain that we have. Even self-improvement is fitted in because after 30 minutes, this gives you plus 12 raw. And I do mean after 30 minutes. Before any of my attempts, I had to stand AFK in the training room for half an hour before I was ready to give it a go. And you might think, oh hey, can't you just do that once and then keep trying? No, because the training dummy, like monsters, builds up resistance to status. So after the first 2-3 sleeps, and therefore the first 2-3 attempts, it takes too long to put it to sleep that I run out of time and I drop buffs like adrenaline rush, like counterstrike. So I have to reset the training room and wait for another half an hour before I can have another go. But again, that's completely fine. We'll go over that more when we get to the actual method. The point is then, altogether, this gives us a colossal amount of extra raw when everything is firing. In fact, this much extra raw, which I'm sure you can agree is quite meaty. Then when we go to the weapon front, this is where things get exciting, because the answer here is not Artian. It is the Grimslayer Urgion, the Guardian Doshagama Greatsword, because look, it has 250 base attack. A Artian with all attack is only 230. And you might think, okay, but Artian has white sharpness. That's a 32% damage increase versus the just 20% increase of blue. That is correct. However, we can push it to white sharpness with a single Handicraft 3 decoration. We then increase our crit damage by 9%, which is just 9% more damage on this hit. And then we get a little tiny bit of bonus attack just to push it up that little bit further here. And it gives us plus 3 raw. This combination equals more overall damage than using an Artian weapon and having 2 crit boosts for 5 crit boost and 3 attack. I have, of course, tested this. Now, you might, the astute amongst you, have noticed, despite this being the weapon that has the capacity to hit the highest number, it has one glaring issue, minus 20% affinity. And as we discussed, affinity is a waste because we only care about damage. It just needs to technically be possible to crit. Well, thankfully, we have a solution, and that is the corrupted mantle. When this is fully activated, we get 10% more damage, so that's delicious for big number, but we also get 30% affinity, which completely eliminates the minus 20 and takes us to plus 10. So 1 in 10 chance for the hit to crit and for, well, the damage to happen. Now, technically speaking, the evasion mantle, well, we'll get to that because the evasion mantle. In any case then, this is our highest damage setup. We have a secondary bowgun with sleep attack in order to put the monster, or the training dummy in this case, to sleep for the double damage, and actually the weapon swapping in Wilds has made this, at least on that front, the smoothest, easiest it's ever been, because in previous games, well, I had to get sleep by using a sleep toad in a zone, I had to get sleep by just waiting for my palicos to RNG sleep the training dummy in Rise with their random attacks, and I hope I got lucky with the timing on my true charge. So being able to control this myself with a couple of shots is really, really lovely. So now we have the target, the attack, and the build. Let's go over the method. So here we are once more in the training room. First and foremost, I need to do that waiting for half an hour after enabling self-improvement before I'm actually ready to do the hit. That takes a while, but obviously there's no danger of it failing or causing failure, it's just a little bit awkward. So let's pretend that half an hour has passed. Next up, we want to drink a Mega Demon Drug. This lasts for longer than we could ever need it to last, so that's just basically done. This gives us plus 7 raw. Then we start the actual bit more finicky stuff. So first and foremost, let's get our training dummy into smash mode, doing strong hits and maximum strength, so it can start really hurting us. And the reason we need to do that is because we want to be in heroics range. So we get that plus 30% damage, and we can just sit on that health so we don't actually have to worry about that when the hit is occurring. So we'll get hit a few times, get sort of in the region, and there it is. Now, I will slowly heal out of heroics as my red health regenerates, but that's good because we don't want to be any more injured than this, as you will see. So we leave the training doing that. Now we kind of start the timers, right? We want to make sure that we have the wounds on, so they are actually on, and here we go. We use demon powder, which is now a 3-minute timer on the clock. After doing that, we want to offset an attack for Dosh Agama's Might. This will start another 3-minute timer, but that's fairly comfortable. After that, we want to put on Corrupted Mantle, and we want to make sure we have activated it to its full state, and we can check that once we have got 10% affinity. That is really nice. So far, so good. Things are a little bit relaxed. Okay. Now we want to swap to our bowgun. That's all well and good, and we head to our sleep ammo. So, now that we've done this, we need to activate counterstrike and adrenaline rush. And we do that by iframing attack and getting hit by an attack. And if you do the timing just perfect, you can do both. Sadly, there I actually only got one because I did it a little bit too perfect, so now I'll get smacked to activate Heroics, Resentment, and Counterstrike. Now we have to be quick. I need to bring my secret. I need to swap back to my greatsword after I put the target dummy to sleep. Then I swap to my greatsword. Please swap to my greatsword. Leap off. I need to have a might pill, and now I need to land the hit. But I have already had adrenaline rush actually fall off, so it's not going to be as impressive as it could be. And of course, I didn't crit because I only have a 10% chance to crit. But that's the general flow. I have to execute that perfectly in order within the timings smoothly and hope that I get the crit until it actually happens. So, yeah, and if you want it all kind of written down, well, here you go. This is what it looks like as a method. But that's okay, because if I am anything, it is persistent. Now, you might be wondering then about Evasion Mantle. See, Evasion Mantle gives a 20% damage increase versus Corrupted Mantle's 10%. And that's why you're currently seeing me use Evasion Mantle in this attempt that you're watching. That's because initially I was using it. And with that, I didn't get the 30% affinity from the Corrupted Mantle. So I was getting my affinity from Gore Magala 2 set and level 3 antivirus. That gave me 5% positive affinity once I'd beaten the frenzy. So beating the frenzy was part of the method. And essentially, I would have to dodge an attack with the light bowgun in Evasion Mantle, then put the barrel to sleep, then swap, then might pill for the extra 25 raw, then land the hit. And that was all well and good. It was a 1 in 20 chance to crit, so yep, was there for a while, and eventually, well, this happened, which was the hit you saw at the beginning. Now, this is all well and good, but I realized something at this point. Wait, food, right? Now, I had eaten myself manually before all this because your food buffs are active in training, thankfully. That's something that you couldn't really bring into training in Rise, for example. And eating meat gives you +2 raw. It's nothing crazy, but it's something. But after doing this hit, and it being so close to 3000, I was like, surely I can push it. Then I remembered feasts exist. So I went to go stuff my face with some sweet raw garlic. What the fuck is wrong with the keepers? And that gives you +5 raw attack, which was enough to push me over the edge above 3000. However, What I then realized, as I was sat back all pleased with myself, is the math doesn't work out as I tried to work out the numbers to make this hit happen based on all the data I've already told you guys. And I couldn't understand why. Then it clicked. I just made the assumption that evasion mantle lasts 20 seconds like it did in World and Iceborne. But the reality is it only lasts 10 seconds. Which means it's impossible to evade an attack, trigger evasion mantle, sleep the monster, swap back to greatsword, have a might pill, and then hit the hit. Which required me to completely go back to the drawing board, redo the set, switch to corrupted mantle as the solution. But the good news is, redoing the set meant I no longer needed any affinity from the set because of corrupted mantle, which actually let me pack a lot more raw damage into it. And then we ended up at the method that I first went over. So without further ado then, and with many trial and error, a lot of attempts, a lot of pain, a lot of tears, I give you the highest damage number possible as a solo hunter in Monster Hunter Wilds. $3,216, and a little bit more if you count the corrupted mantle hits alongside it, bumping it up to 3,520. Oh, I am very happy and proud of that one, team, and I hope it brought you some awe to see it happen. Now, of course, there was a lot of failed attempts. And I think my favorite is where everything went smoothly, finally. I didn't manage the crit, and as I was walking off to try again, I learnt that the training dummy can actually kill you, which led to me requiring just the perfect amount of health so that activating resentment and counterstrike also put me in heroics for the hit. So that was fun. If you want then some mathing of this, because of course you do, that's the most fun part about this, numbers. We have 478 attack when all is taken into account. That's your corrupted, your heroics, all of your raw, your base weapon. It's a marvel to see. So we take that 478 and we times it by 1.32, ergo our white sharpness. We then times that by 1.34 for the crit with 3 crit boost, 845. We then times that by 1.9, the motion value. We then times that by 2 because the monster was asleep, and that gets us 3,213. We times that by 1 because of the hit zone being 1, so nothing changes, and there we have it. And you might be like, wait, that's really close, but the hit was 3,216. You are, well, just a little bit off. You're 3 less. Well, that's down to simple rounding errors, as I'm not taking into account all the various decimal places as we go along. But the fact remains, this is the way for the biggest number, at least today. With updates, with more powerful weapons, with more skill space, this will improve, and I will be sure to bring you said improvement. Though, as I did highlight, this is the highest damage number you can reasonably hit solo. As I said earlier, technically you could use the Fulguranginath. You could have a small monster asleep near it so you can hit that with the little hit before focus mode turning the true charge onto the sleeping Fulguranginath. You can have more damage from hunting horns buffing you. You can get lucky with the Caprice food skill happening to activate in the couple seconds before the hit. You could even bring in Fortify and the big damage multiplier for dying twice on a quest. That doesn't work in the training room, though your set has to be a lot worse to enable that, so it might not actually be better overall, but it's still something to think about. There are methods, but they require a team, and they require coordination, and it's not something I can do by myself, but I really like the purity of without any help, how hard can I hit? So while I'm sure that this can be beaten, right, Chris?
I think I sense a disturbance here.
I think it's fair to say that it is impressive nonetheless. For now then, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have thoroughly enjoyed this. Like and subscribe if you had. Consider supporting the future of the channel on Patreon down below. It's through that support we can do these bigger, more in-depth projects. And until we meet again, a goodbye.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.